Joy Lewis. I'm happy to have an opportunity to visit with you today a little bit about the adventure. The adventure, of course, is being a Suzuki parent and a Suzuki teacher. And I looked up the word, I gave that title about the Suzuki parenting and teaching, the great adventure. And then I thought, well, I better look what is an adventure. And the definition that we're given by Webster is an unusual and exciting, typically hazardous experience or activity. The secondary definition was daring and exciting activity, calling for enterprise and enthusiasm. And then the verb is engaging in hazardous and exciting activity, especially of an unknown nature. And I had to give a real smile because I think I picked the right word. Suzuki parenting is something that I've done for 50 years. And Suzuki teaching, I've done even longer than that. We won't go into how longer. But both of those have been exciting. And in some respects, my friends, it's hazardous. Why? Mostly because of the unknown nature. When we start out on our journey as teachers or as Suzuki parents, there's a lot of things that we don't know about what's going to happen in our experience. If we are the kind of personality who would like to have absolute known outcomes, it's a real challenge and we have to grow with that. Because the really known outcomes don't exist. Dr. Suzuki says that every child can learn. And as a Suzuki teacher and as a Suzuki parent, I believe that it's very, very important that we believe that. And we want to create a journey, an adventure, that allows the truth of that to be existing in the life of the children that we're working with, whether they're our own or our students. But typically, if you were on an adventure, climbing a mountain or something, there are some things that you would need to make preparations to make that a successful journey. One is traveling companions. After my son and my granddaughter and I were all here last week, and we had come here from a little, very brief but quite delightful day in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And there are all kinds of mountains, and there are slag piles that you look for old copper. And my son and his daughter took a 10-foot slide down a slag pile. And that was not part of the adventure that was planned, but the footing was such that they slid down, and so she looked at him and she said, "Daddy, your foot is going the wrong way." Well, sure enough, those kinds of things happen in adventures. There are slips, there are unexpected things that you take into account. And one of the things that you do on an adventure to make sure that it's safe is you have traveling companions. Grandma was there in this case, so I could do whatever Band-Aids were necessary and all that sort of thing. When we got back to our hotel that night, there was a Survivor show on about a guy who had climbed a huge mountain all by himself with no traveling companions, and he had fallen 2,000 feet. Now, he survived, and this program was all about how. But the point is, he said later, he should never have gone without traveling companions. Now, with us in the Suzuki world, we all have traveling companions. Who are they? We have the teacher, the parent, and the child. And we are making this adventurous journey into learning to play and becoming a fine person together. And that gives us a lot of protection and confidence. The traveling companions each have jobs. You know, the mountain climber guy, if he had a traveling companion who was securing the ropes for him, he would have had something to catch him in the midst of his fall. He wasn't. Instead, because he was on his own, so his fall was huge. Our traveling companions and their jobs really make our journey quite workable. Now let's think about the teacher, those of us who are teaching. Our job in this wonderful traveling companion triangle that Dr. Suzuki tells about is to chart the trip. We're cartographers, if you will. We're setting the map. Of course, in this day, do you know how hard it is to find an atlas? You can't just go into Walmart and get one anymore, because everybody does it on GPS. But there are some around, and even the GPS is a charted course, right? And that's the teacher's job, to know how to get from not knowing to skill and ownership. So the teacher is the one who sets the course, decides the trip. And the teacher has gotten there not by random good luck, but by taking teacher training, by having been a student themselves, by continuing to take teacher training, by going to conferences, by talking to colleagues. I mean, it goes on and on. Some of the people who are teachers in the class that I'm teaching this week have had, 30 units of teacher training, and they're back for more. Why? Because they are interested in the ideas of many people, many approaches, many ways to set a course to help the student and the parent as part of their team to get from here to there. It's fabulous, and that's our job, teachers. We keep thinking, we keep learning, we keep training, we keep trying ideas, and so that we become the best cartographers possible for our students. Well, another point of our traveling companion group as we start on this adventure is the parent. Now, what is the parent's job? The parent is the navigator. Have you ever been in the car back in the days when we had the map before Siri told us to turn left and right and all that stuff? Somebody had to read the map while the driver's going. They've made a plan, but somebody's got to say, this is the corner where you turn right. I guess in a way Siri has become that, right? All right. Turn right here. Turn left there. Go to Michigan Street and take a left. In 400 yards, whatever. But the parent sees that plan that's laid out by the teacher and then navigates the journey through the plan. It's really a fabulous thing. What does that mean? The parent needs to understand at least the portion of the map, if you will, that's being dealt with right now. Maybe the parent doesn't, as a parent, you don't see the very, very end of, let's say, the Tchaikovsky concerto when your child is learning light libro or is in Suzuki early education class. But that's okay. That's okay. What you understand is the part of the journey that's mapped right now. And how do we know that? We go to the lessons, we take the notes, or record on the cell phone, or whatever it is we do in this day and age, to be able to go home and take advantage of that corner of the traveling companion triangle that has laid out a plan. It was very fascinating for me as a teacher to also be a Suzuki mom. Because sometimes I taught my children, but sometimes I took them to other teachers. And I learned a great deal. Even though I'm a teacher, I've got my plan from listening to what that other teacher's plan was and trying to implement it exactly. And that's the wonderful job of the parent. Pay attention, understand what it is the teacher's wanting. And it could be that maybe you don't quite understand why bending the thumb on the bow is the most important thing. It may be a lot more important than the notes to lightly row. But that's okay. You will grow to understand it. And meanwhile, the cartographer has said, in order to get where we're going on this journey, we have to turn left at the bent thumb. Okay. So those very specific instructions from the teacher is something that, as a parent, we want to get. We want to get it down. If we can, we want to try to understand it. But even if we don't totally understand it, we get what it is, and that way we can navigate the child through that at home. Now, the job of the parent and the teacher comes together in another traveling companion kind of thing, and that is what I would call cheerleading. You know how it is if somebody approves of your attempts? I can remember how it was in my family to cook in the kitchen with one of my aunts. If you did this or that, she would say, oh, you know, that was just such a good idea. That was really a good whisk you gave to those eggs, you know. Well then, what am I going to do? I'm going to whisk those eggs. Because she was the kind of a person in the kitchen that we as parents and teachers can be with our students. We encourage. I called it cheerleading, but it's not superficial. It's the real thing. Approving of the work, approving of the attempts, approving of that climb, if you will, up the mountain, and the steps that are taken. That does not mean that everything is always right, and it doesn't mean that we always need to say, oh, you're wonderful. In fact, we are encouraged by psychologists to praise specifically and descriptively rather than judgmentally. So instead of saying, and I fall prey to this, I say, good job, oh, that sounded beautiful. Those are really my judgments. What's even better is to say, your work for that really produced better intonation. Then maybe it could be followed with, good job. What the student learns is that their work caused the intonation to improve. Right, you know, like the teacher said. And so consequently, they've got, if you will, money in their emotional bank. They know that their work can cause improvement. And in fact, there was a study, and I'm sorry that I can't quote what study, I've lost track of that, but children of varying degrees of experience with math were given math problems. And they started out with a control group and another group. And the problems were too easy for them. And then they got up into the level that they should probably know from what they'd been taught. And then they got more difficult than probably what they had already been taught. One group was told, you are so smart. Oh, you're wonderful. The other group, the response to their correct answers when they were easy was, excellent work. I liked how you stuck with that, you got that answer. And then they looked at how far those children went into the problems that were really past what they'd been taught. The group that had been praised judgmentally and told that they were smart gave up much sooner. Because not being able to do the problems probably meant they weren't smart. Whereas the group that had been praised descriptively and told that their work was outstanding, that they liked how they stuck with the job, those young people went far, far into the difficult problems, the things that they really hadn't been taught. And in some cases, they figured them out. Because the emotional bank account that they had praised the work, the attempt. And I think that is such a tremendous thing for us as traveling companions to have with us. That's really one of our tools that we would take on our adventure. Well, we've mentioned two of the traveling companions, of course, the teacher, the parent. And then there's the third one, the student. Now the student, of course, is the one who seems to be making the most out of the journey. But you know, if you're a Suzuki parent, you're getting a lot, aren't you? And you're giving a lot. And the teacher with all this training and all this thought and looking at each student and trying to get the best for them, wow, there's a lot for them too. So the third point of this equilateral triangle that represents our traveling companions on our hazardous adventure is the child. And the child's responsibility is what? Dr. Suzuki said the child's goal is happiness. Oh, for goodness sake, happiness? Happiness? We're supposed to be learning how to pull a straight bow and get F sharp, you know? We're supposed to be happy? And what he meant by happiness of children was not the temporary stuff that comes from getting a sucker right now because you want it. Stomp your foot, you know? But rather the long-term confidence that comes from knowing you're okay, you can do stuff. You've got stuff inside of you, and it is good. And when children get that, in truth, I think they can learn anything. But that is very, very important. So our traveling companions need to have a working relationship that is not contentious. Now, does that mean it never is contentious? And I would say, have you taken any camping trip, any mountain climbing, any vacation that didn't have a flat tire sometime or, you know, something? And the answer is no, we probably haven't. You know, we have our troubles on our adventures. And the same will be true on the Suzuki adventure. But the overall relationship needs to be one of care and concern and joy and delight and happiness. And when we find it is, then we can get through those tough things. Yeah, there's some day. Do you ever have a day, Mom, when you just would sort of like to not cook supper? Yeah. You've made a million meals and tonight you'd really like to not make a meal? Yeah. Or how about doing the dishes or any of 1,000 things? And the same can be true with the student. You know, they practiced and practiced and practiced, and today we have to practice again. You know, I mean, it's like, really? Really? And so those are normal. Those are normal things. And so we find ways, because we know we have to feed the family, so we're going to find a way to cook. So what are we going to do? Well, maybe we'll go out to eat, you know, or maybe we'll look up a recipe that we haven't made for years, something to engage the interest. And the same with the student. Maybe we change the course of the practice. Maybe we practice outside, like going out to eat, or going out to practice. Something that allows what needs to be done, but in a way that allows the person a little bit of freshness. Well, we've talked about traveling companions, the teacher, student going on our adventure. We also have tools. If we're going on an adventure, a mountain climber is going to need ropes and certain kind of shoes and, things that can grab onto the rock, whatever you call those things, hooks, and so forth. And when you go fishing, you've got to have a pole, and you've got to have some line, and you have to have your bait. And so any adventure we have has tools. Well, our tools that we have are interesting, I think. Certainly, let me start with what I think is one of the most important tools, and that is an instrument setup that works. It's possible to go on eBay and get some violin and bow, and you get it there and it sounds like a cardboard box, And so that isn't so much fun to play it, and the teacher doesn't have so much fun, and you don't really like to listen to it, the kid doesn't really like to do it. And I'm not talking necessarily against eBay if you know what you're doing, but the point is, we want our tools to be the best we can, as we can do it, in the sizes that we need. If the teacher's going to be talking about ringtones, you have to have an instrument that will ring. If you're violin, cello, or something like that. Piano, of course, really the same, but it's a little bit different on the kid. But the point is, you want to learn about that, and make sure that those tools are good. We want, in our toolbox, to have ideas. And the ideas about how to follow that journey, that cartographer's map, with the kind of thing that keeps the heart in the child. Now, those kinds of tools come to you maybe from your teacher, from other parents in the studio, from books, from lectures at Institute. You read down the list and it's great. There's things about how to practice with a happy heart and, various things. I think at that point, I absolutely am compelled to say it's important to know what tools work best for our own children, because not everybody is the same. One size does not fit all. And the only time I could tell you exactly what to do to motivate your child to good practice is when I had one child. I got it figured out for Brian. And so, if you asked me before I had son number 2, I could have told you. But as soon as I had number 2, I started doubting, and by the time I had number 3 child, I didn't know at all. I remember Bill Starr saying he had 8 children, and he had no idea what age they learned to walk or talk or anything, because they were all different. And I think taking those differences into account is one of the important tools that we bring into our adventure. We have to notice, pay attention to, and allow for differences. And I'm not giving the whole lecture around different personality types, which I have done before. But I did bring a couple books, and I'm going to make a couple of comments. I recommend a book by Robert Rohm, R-O-H-M, called Positive Personality Profiles, and a companion book, Personality Insights for Moms, written by Susan Crook, and she did it in conjunction with Robert Rohm. Now, what they did was take a look at the different ways that people react to things. And they gave them descriptive letters and put them into a circle. So if I had a whiteboard here, I could draw a big round pie shape, big circle, and that would be their body of material. Each It's interesting that over many years, many variety of people have come up with the recognition that people are different. They're not the same. Clear back to the Greeks. Remember the melancholic and the sanguine and all that? I could never remember exactly what about that. It seemed so complicated. And they used to think it was body fluid or something that made the difference. So people have been thinking about this for years. These folks drew a line through the big pie. So we have a big circle. We draw a line. We have an upper hemisphere and a lower hemisphere. And to the upper, they named that portion of the circle outgoing. Okay, now if you think of outgoing characteristics, can you just shout out some of them to me?
Talkative.
Talkative.
Likes to be around people.
Likes to be around people.
Charismatic.
Say it again.
Charismatic.
Charismatic. Absolutely.
Leaders.
Leaders, that's right. And it's
Bossy.
Bossy.
Bossy, absolutely. Quite willing to be bossy.
Yeah.
Right. Then the lower hemisphere was reserved. Well, we could shout out those too, you know. That's sort of the reverse, isn't it? It's
Oh,
quiet, right. The
Thoughtful.
thoughtful, that's right.
Sensitive.
It's a whole different way of responding to the world, the outgoing and the reserved. Is one good and one bad? The answer is no. They're just different. And in the same household, with the same parents, and the same food for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, we get children who are different. Now, if we divide that pie and make two hemispheres, left and right, the left one they call task orientation, and the right one they call people orientation. The task orientation was that you relate to the task being done first. Doesn't mean that you don't like people or that you can't relate to people, but getting the job done is very important. On the right side is people orientation, which is relating first to how people are doing in the situation. That does not mean those people cannot get a job done. It only means that their first approach is relating to how the people are doing. And the example that he gives in the book, I appreciated very much. It was about a manager in an office. And the person who was to work in the office was late getting there because her child got sick in the car. She had to take the child to a different situation than school, find a childcare, clean the car, and then come to work. So she was obviously late. So the task-oriented manager might say, oh, sorry, you know, we've got a deadline by 5 o'clock, so you're gonna have to miss lunch. You're gonna need to stay through lunch and work on that because we have to meet the deadline. The people-oriented manager might say, oh, I'm so sorry. You know, you really had a hell of a morning, if you will excuse the expression. And I'll tell you what, right after you come back from lunch, I'll try to get a couple of co-workers on the task with you because we have a 5 o'clock deadline that we have to meet. So both of them really did care about the person, and both of them really wanted to get the job done. However, their initial reaction was different. One was to the job, one was to the person. I'd like you to take your pencil, if you have it, or pen, write your name in your dominant and your non-dominant hand. And then I want you to, after you've had a chance to do that, to describe to me what are the differences. Some people, of course, are ambidextrous, so you guys are special. Most of us have a dominant and a non-dominant.
Spacing is different.
Spacing is different. Anything else?
Yeah, time.
Say it again.
Time. Took longer in a non-dominant.
That's right. The speed at which you can do it.
Size.
The style?
The size.
Oh, size. Yes, the non-dominant was larger, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Concentration.
Concentration, it took a lot more thought to do it with a non-dominant. that's what they say. When we look at these personality differences, we all, they say, have a little of everything. But most of us have two strong areas. And most often, the two strong areas are next to each other, like DI, both on the outgoing, or I and S. Well, D, oh, you don't know that yet because I haven't told you. The intersection of task orientation and outgoing, they assigned a letter D at an exclamation point. And these people are decisive, driving, determined. They can, when they're a child, they can seem to be defiant. Maybe they don't even mean to be defiant, but their action seems like it is, because they're so strong. And they don't mind telling you how it ought to be. Okay, there's that bossy thing. Okay, then you go on the outgoing but people-oriented. They give it an I, the symbol is a star, and those are the talkers. Interaction is so important. Have you ever seen a group class where the teacher asks a question, the child waves their hand, the teacher calls on them and they say, I have new shoes. We've seen that, haven't we? And that's because, even though the teacher asked a specific question, what the child heard was, who wants to interact with the teacher? Who wants to interact? Then we go on the people-oriented side to reserve. They give it the letter S, the symbol is plus and minus. And that would be the child in group class who never wants to speak up. Might know that right answer, but very quiet, very reserved, very oriented toward the teacher, pays attention and everything, but doesn't want attention on them. Then we move on the reserved side to task-oriented. We get the letter C, so we have DISC, D-I-S-C. The C represents the reserved and task-oriented. And if we have a perfectionist kind of child who just always wants, it's really hard to work on the fourth measure because you have to start at the beginning, for goodness sake, you know. And that falls into the C category. It's gotta be right, it's gotta be complete, it's gotta be whole. They are less, not that they don't like games, but they're less motivated by games. They'd rather kind of stick to the job, get the job done, and they want it to be right. Whereas the I kid, could be right, could be wrong, don't really care so long as we're having fun. So we have all these possibilities. And then we have, in our traveling companions, 3 sets.
Yeah.
What are the chances that we all line up? You know, what if we have a C teacher? Really like it right, thank you, and I'd like it now. We have a 3 or 4-year-old who is a D. I'm going to do it my way, and when I want to. And we have an S parent who just wants everybody to be okay. So we have to learn to work with our traveling companions. And one of our tools is trying to understand the different personalities. Now, I believe that the only people who can really change in this situation are the adults. We teach the children, and they do lots of changing over many years. But when we are working with a 3 or 4-year-old, or even 7 or 8, or even teens, chances are we need to learn to speak their language much more than we need to require that they speak ours. And that's why we care about this. It's communication, isn't it? It's communication to give our journey compatibility so that we can actually get there from here. How do you get there from here? Well, we have to work together. And we have to figure out how to work together, and as the adults, we do it. So if an parent is an S and the child is a D, even though your mode of operating might not be to be tough with that child, In a way, you'll have to learn to set boundaries for the benefit of the child, because that 3 or 4-year-old doesn't have your life judgment to be able to know what should be done. And that's tough if you don't feel that way, you know? But for the benefit of the child, for the communication and everything, it's necessary. As teachers, you know, what if we are an S? And we have a parent who's a D, who wants to go ahead, and the parent is pushing for going for learning pieces real fast, and we want skills to be our point, not just what piece you play. Well, then as a teacher, we have to raise our D. We have to teach. This is what this is about. We're learning to become skilled so that we can play any piece. In truth, my friends, it is not better to play Song of the Wind than Lightly Row. It doesn't make a difference. What is important is how well you play it. Are you getting the skills? Then, of course, then the repertoire is some representation of progress. But it is only one little thing. And all of us, I mean, teachers fall into the trap too. We all do. It's a numbered sequence repertoire. It's a great repertoire. So everybody knows it's better to be on piece 8 than piece 2. Well, maybe not. Maybe not. It's better to play piece 2 beautifully, to have the bend in the thumb, to have the intonation, and to be able to celebrate getting that, than to play the next series of pieces without the bend in the thumb and without the intonation. So it's fascinating, and we all adjust is the word I want, not judge. We all, as adults, need to make the adjustments as a traveling companion that can make this journey work. Yeah,
Mrs. Wills,
fascinating.
can you
Well, I
repeat
talked-
those books again, the names of the books and the
Yes,
authors?
and I have them here you could look at later. Personality Insights for Moms. It's by Susan Crook. And it's excellent because she gives absolute examples of if you feel this way and your child acts this way, then here's what you can do to get this result. She's not a musician, so she's not talking about practice, but it's very, very useful. And the other is Positive Personality Profiles. And Robert Rohm, R-O-H-M, is the author of that.
So it's called personality what for moms?
Personality Profiles. Is that what you said? The other one's Personality Insights for moms. Yeah. Fascinating, so fascinating. Okay, well, that said, how are we doing? Oh, we're to the time that they say we're supposed to be done. And we've only just hit the surface of our journey. We started thinking about the fact that this is an adventure. It is an adventure because there are some hazards. There are the 3-year-old D's. You know, I think I have one right in my family. My little granddaughter from those of you who were here last week, she is really good for 4 minutes of practice right now. That's kind of her thing. She hasn't started official lessons yet, and probably will in the fall. But we see those personality traits of, I will do this, and I will do this now. Or I won't do this, and you know. So that's going to be very interesting. And I must say, last week my son and I gave a joint talk about what he learned from me on his journey and what I learned from him on our journey together. And he apologized publicly to me for all he put me through, which I appreciated because now he's got her. And now he gets it. Yes. Also, one of the tools that I would be remiss, couldn't end a talk without mentioning this tool, and that is the power of the music itself. We have to listen. Listen, listen, listen. And it was very fun last week, my son and I decided when we were going to give this joint talk that we would not compare notes ahead of time. We did that on purpose because he and I both wanted to hear what the other one absolutely believed from the gut, that we had learned from each other. And one of the things that I said, well, lots of things lined up. We were so tickled how they did line up. But one of the things that I had remembered from his being quite young was that he definitely was a DI, very outgoing and pretty strong. And it would be tricky if I would start out telling him a whole bunch of stuff to do, or that he needed to make something a certain way, be a certain way. But what I discovered was that if we played the music, he was drawn to the music. He loved the music. He heard the dynamics. He heard the sense of strength or the stopped bow in a way that was better than my saying, okay, now you have to stop the bow. So what did we do? We listened, listened, and listened. And you know, one of the first things on his list, 3 words. Listen, listen, listen. He remembered that what we did when he was little was listen, listen, listen. To the Suzuki music, to other music, lots and lots of listening. And the power of the music is so great that it's one of the best tools that we as parents have on our portion of the journey. And it certainly is one of the best tools for the children because their expectations built. It helps you learn. It builds your motivation. Oh gosh, you want to play Allegro. Oh gosh, you want to play Perpetua. Oh, you want to play Fiocco. You know, whatever it is. How do you know you want to play it? Because you've heard it. You as the parent or I as the teacher could not discuss with the child why it's wonderful to play Fiocco Allegro or Bach double or anything else. It just doesn't work that way. But the music does. It's cool. It has energy. It has form. It has vitality. And the kids hear that. And it helps them learn. It sounds like this. Some children develop a really early ear-finger relationship. So for them, it's like flying. Others takes a little longer to develop that ear-finger relationship. But in the end, everybody gets it. Everybody gets it. And how do you know what you're going to play? You hear it. You hear it, yes.
I agree totally, but my granddaughter does not want to listen. She complains when we put the music on.
She does. That's
I don't know how to deal with that.
Okay.
You have
Well,
any tips?
one of the things that I would do is just put it on in the background. You may do that already, but just as much as possible. I have a parent who had kids do dances to the music. So it engaged the physical. And I thought that was good too, in terms of just being loose and relaxed. So maybe with a child who, you know, maybe there's something about the physical activity that would be good, really help with that. Yeah. So anyway, my friends, we have to finish at some point here. But what I want for you is that your adventure has all the drama, the energy, the fun, along with the hazards, the days that are tough, where the child would rather play outside than practice. But all the things that go together to make our adventure work, so that when you get to the point that you look back on the adventure, you can realize that was a trip, an adventure of a lifetime. And I think, even though I'm kind of starting again with the granddaughter, that's where I am with my children. They're all adults. They have their perception of the trip. I have my perception of the trip, but I'm sure our teachers when I took them to somebody else, had their perception about it. But we can all look back and say, you know, that was a